So, yesterday I read Luke chapter 1, and of course, I found it extremely warm and it feels like Christmas. So, when I read that part, Elizabeth and Mary were given the prophecy that they will give birth to John and Jesus. I don't know why, but today I thought of Abraham and Lot, his nephew. So I went to Genesis and I realized that God didn't lead me to read these two chapters, Genesis and Luke, for no reason, especially in two consecutive days. So I want to talk about what I discovered. Abraham and Sarah's story compare with Mary's. So I'll be talking about Abraham and Sarah first, and then we will go to Mary. I find out a very interesting thing that Abraham was a man with a plan B, and Sarah was a quote unquote helper of God. So God assured Abraham 3 times that he would give birth to a son, and Abraham would have a descendant. Now, the first time was when God clarified that, okay, so this time Abraham was Abram. He was not Abraham yet. So Abram's descendant would come from his own bowels, uh, as in the King James Version, and the covenant will be unto thy seed. That's what God said to Abram. So by saying that, God excluded Lot, who was Abram's nephew. When God told Abram to, go leave your country, get out of your father's house, away from your people, to a land which I will show you. So when God said that, Abram took Lot with him. Why? I believe we can resonate with that. All of a sudden, God told Abram to live in an environment that he was so familiar with. That was his hometown, his father's house, his own people, and to go to a land that God didn't even tell him where is it. He just told him to leave, to take off. We often react to a new season of life just as Abram. I want to bring something familiar with me from the old season. I want to bring an old friend with me, someone who is in my old circle. Even though God said, away from your people and your father's house. So Abram brought Lot. He did that also because, Abram was really old, 75 years old, when he departed out of Haran, that is his hometown. And Abram was, very soon he accumulated a lot of wealth, even before he reached the land that God said he would show him. So, who is gonna inherit all those property? That's also an important reason that Abram brought Lot with him, so that he would have a descendant. Now, Lot was Abram's plan B. And now because Abram and Lot were way too wealthy, and they could not occupy the same land anymore. So now to avoid conflict, they have to be separated. And it wasn't until that Lot departed from Abram, then God showed Abram the place as he promised that he would show him. Okay, now we know that in Genesis chapter 15, the Lord came to Abram in a vision. I just want to chime in here real quick about how God speaks to us. He speaks to us not like really audible. It's not a sound. It's not literally about hearing. God is very visual. He speaks to us like to little children, and children love picture books, right? And a lot of times that you see a vision and you dream a dream, you don't understand because you are not yet a children. And God revealed the truth to the little babies and not to the wise. So many times, when we heard something in the mind, it's very often not from God, but the enemies. And sometimes it's our own carnal minds. Okay, so let's go back to Abram and the promised son. So God came to Abram's vision and told him that you will give birth to a son, and that will be your own seed, which at this point God excluded Lot. So this is the first time that God clarified that your plan B is not gonna work. Who you thought was your descendant is not the descendant I am going to give you. And don't settle with Lot, your nephew. I will give you a real son of yours. So after this, this is the first time, right? This is the first time God told Abram that he would have his own son. Then we all knew what happened to Sarah and what Sarah did, right? Sarah was, not just a helper of her husband, but she also wanted to help God. She was trying to help God fulfill his own promise. So Sarah gave her maid Hagar to Abram, and Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. And at that time, a maid belonged to the mistress. So a maid's son is actually her mistress's son. It was the same situation in ancient China. At that time, let's say a noble lady married to the Chinese emperor as his concubine. And then she would usually bring a maid from her father's household. And sometimes, the emperor just found, okay, this noble lady, this concubine's maid was beautiful. So the emperor wants the maid as well to be his concubine. And what would happen is that this maid, even though she also married to the emperor, she would still be below her lady. And if she gave birth to a son, and that son actually will be given to her lady. So that's the same situation with Sarah and Hagar. And that is, I believe is one of the reasons that Sarah appears so generous, without much jealousy, at least at the beginning, to let her husband sleep with another woman, because that woman at that time was not considered as a woman but Sarah's belonging, and her children belonged to Sarah as well. Now the second time, God told Abram he would have a son. This time Ishmael was already born, and this time God changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means the father of many nations, and also Sarai to Sarah. It's interesting that God changed Sarai's name as well this time, probably because this time God clarified that the promised son would come from Sarah. Okay, immediately, this is the funny part that I saw. So God said, and this is Genesis chapter 17, verse 16, and I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is in 100 years old, and shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear children? And Abraham said unto God, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. So that's the part I love, because Abraham actually didn't really believe what God said, right? And usually, as we read the Bible, if you remember John the Baptist, his father didn't believe what the angel Gabriel said, and he immediately expressed his doubt, and he ended up being muted, right? But Abraham was really sly, okay? He was thinking all of that in his mind. And I think that Abraham was really good at communication. He didn't speak it out loud. Instead of telling God that, oh, that's impossible, Abraham was trying to act dumb. I would even say that, trying to act innocent, trying to act like, there's no doubt in me at all. I just misunderstood you, God. That's what made me laugh a lot in that part. So, as we talked about from the beginning, Abraham was a man with a plan B. So, after his first plan B, Lot, being denied by God, and Abraham now has another plan B, and that is Ishmael. And this time, God clarified it would be Sarah that will give birth to the son of his promise. And this son, his name will be Isaac, not Ishmael. And God even, assure him further that he even gave him a time frame, which is Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. So we don't know when was the set time, but we know it's probably going to come next year. And I believe in Abraham's heart that make him feel so much better. Finally I have a rough time frame. I'm not waiting for nothing. Let's move on to the last time and the third time, when God assured Abraham, that you will have a son and your son will come from Sarah and his name is Isaac. And this is in chapter 18. God showed up at Abraham's house as an incarnated Trinity. So the Bible said that, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. Okay, so Abraham saw God incarnation. And remember, this was the first time Sarah actually heard the promise. And of course, we all knew that Sarah laughed and denied that she laughed. We see that all these 3 times God clarified further and denied every plan B Abraham had. So what got me thinking about this is God actually confirmed with Abraham over and over about a covenant between them. This just makes me wonder and stand in awe for God's compassion, I would say. Because, a lot of times we always talk about, we tell each other, okay, you should have faith. But honestly, Abraham didn't show much of his faith until he did this marvelous thing that when he sacrificed Isaac. But before that, he even lied to the Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister, okay? That's pretty ridiculous. And here that God needs to tell him over and over that I will give you a son and it's going to be from Sarah. And that is not Ishmael. That is not Lot. So Abraham was almost just like us. We always say that Abraham is a man of faith. Yes. But that doesn't mean that everything he did in his life, is faithful or is out of faith. And God was not too harsh on him. He understood that what he promised seems impossible for a human mind, to grasp. And God also have compassion that Abraham and Sarah only grew older and older while waiting for that son. So you can imagine, and God understand that their doubt will grow as time goes by. And God was not accusing them of doubting him. God didn't accuse them for having a plan B, and instead, God blessed Ishmael as well. God also delivered Lot out of those evil people when he destroyed the whole town. I feel very resonate with them. And sometimes I feel guilty for having a plan B. And I also feel guilty when I was trying to help God to fulfill, some of his promise to me. And I realized, I need to do this so I can make it happen faster. And God is waiting on me to make it happen. I want to be active. I want to act. I listened to a lot of teaching, a lot of sermon. I heard that some teachers said that a plan B is an insult to God, which I agree. And there are also preachers that teach people that you need to co-labor with God, which I also agree. But I began like trying to help God, like Sarah, and justify it as I am co-laboring with God. But I was just trying to give birth to Ishmael and not knowing or not having enough faith to believe that God has Isaac for me, right? So now I wanted to move on to why this reminds me and how Abraham and Sarah's story associate with the Gospel of Luke chapter 1 when the angel Gabriel came to Mary. So Mary and Sarah, mother of Jesus, the mother of many nations, they are a great comparison. I was pretty shocked when I read Luke yesterday. It feels like I read it the first time. So I'm going to read the original scripture to you. So Luke chapter 1 verse 30 said that, "And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. And he shall be great, shall be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end." Okay, this is the point. Listen to Mary's response to the angel, okay? So, verse 34. "So then said Mary unto the angel, How shall this be, seeing I know not a man?" This is the part that I was shocked. I don't think that's how you will respond in that situation. That is not gonna be most of our response. At least my first reaction will be, I see. Okay, I need to tell Joseph, we need to get married right now. Because God just told me that I'm going to give birth to a son. So we need to get married right now so this can happen. What you will be thinking in your mind might be how to help God to make this happen, to fulfill his word. That I'm going to give birth to the Son of God, but I'm a virgin, so I have to get married, and I'm already engaged to a man called Joseph. So I need to talk to Joseph, and we together need to make this happen. And then that's what most people would think. And that way of thinking, especially after I read Genesis today, I realized that is the way Abraham and Sarah think, right? They use their carnal mind, they use their human reasoning and try to help God to manifest his word. But I was really impressed to see how Mary responded. So first of all, Mary didn't assume that she should tell Joseph and they should get married ASAP so she can give birth to Jesus. Instead, this is how Mary responded. She asked unto the angel, How shall this be, seeing I know not a man? I want you guys to pay attention to this. First of all, when Mary doesn't understand how God can fulfill this word on her, she asked him directly to clarify. She didn't reason it in her mind. She didn't assume with her human reasoning. The second part in Mary's answer, seeing I know not a man. If I were Mary and I knew that I'm engaged to Joseph, I probably would not think in the present tense. So if you guys notice that Mary was thinking in the present tense, because in the present, at this moment, Gabriel the angel visited her. She has not yet been married. And so she was still a virgin at that very moment, even though she knew very well that she was engaged to Joseph and she wouldn't be a virgin soon. So do you guys see the humility and the wisdom that come from that humility? What I see just from that simple answer is, number one, she didn't assume how God's will be fulfilled. Instead, she asked God about it. Number two is that she understands timing. So in Acts chapter 1 verse 7, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has put in his own power. So we're not supposed to know the timing. Timing is God's biggest secret. So when God told you something, whether you just got a dream or you have a vision, or God sent someone to speak to you, it is always time sensitive. There is a reason that God chose that specific time to speak to you, and your response should be based on and grounded in the present. You should not assume in the future tense, if that makes sense. So Mary's answer is all based upon the moment. At this moment, I receive a word of God, so I should respond according to who I am. And at this specific moment, I am a virgin, so there is no way I can give birth to the Son of God, right? That is the way Mary thinks. She thinks in the present tense. I don't know about you, but I am the type of person who have a lot of reasoning, a lot of logic going on, and I believe a lot of us are like this. We don't mind being in a difficult situation. We don't mind experiencing some hardship, some heartbreaks, some wilderness seasons, as long as we know why we are in that situation, as long as we know that why things happen to us, what is the purpose, why. We're always trying to understand why. We're always trying to reason our way out of it. It's almost like as long as we can understand, then we can forgive, then we can move on, then we can have peace with God, then we can have faith in Him and trust again. Because we want to understand why those terrible things happen to us. But the reality is our human reasoning will give us a lot of trouble and a lot of delays, believe it or not. And the way we interpret is always going to be less than God's intention and God's promise. It's always going to be, compromised. Believe it or not, our human nature, we think ourselves so lowly that we are willing to settle. But God, who loves us so much, will not let us settle. That is what happened to Abraham and Sarah. Abraham was willing to settle with Lot, let his nephew be his descendant, and they were both willing to settle with Ishmael. But God was unwilling to let his beloved settle. Mary, on the other hand, seemed to be, so significant and so favored in the Bible. But we all knew that at that time it was a disaster for an unmarried woman to be pregnant. But what we read from the Gospel of Luke is that this teenage girl, this virgin, was extremely humble. Humility is based upon self-worth, that you know your worth, then you can be humble, right? And Mary knows her worth. She was not trying to reason anything, she's not trying to settle for anything. She was humble. Because of her humility, she had this faith that is astonishing to me. That's almost meek and blunt in some way. Sometimes I feel like we're too sharp, we're too smart, we're too quick to judge and to interpret and to reason and to trying to understand and figure it out. But Mary, she was not doing any of that. She was like the opposite. And that definitely convicted me and inspired me a lot about trusting in God, about surrendering to God, about just asking Him, how shall this be? Without doubting. Clearly Abraham and Sarah doubted God. And that is why they always have a plan B. And they're always trying to help God to fulfill His own promise, right? But Mary wasn't doing any of that. So this is my message today. Whatever situation we're in, whatever promise God gives us, whatever word He gives us, I hope that we all learn from Mary. When God shows us something that we don't understand, and we won't assume how this is going to fulfill, how this is going to manifest, and we won't think beyond the present tense, because God's message is always time sensitive. We must focus on the present. We must focus on today and be humble enough and ask God, how shall this be? With trust, not with doubt. Okay, so I hope this will be a great message to start this November. And I know it's the election month, and I pray that whoever becomes the president of the United States will not be a disaster for America and will not be a disaster for this whole world. Now, God bless you all. Until next time, peace.